Let me ask you this. Does your team need constant guidance? Do they produce inconsistent results? Do you often have to correct or redo tasks from them? And maybe you're even thinking, it's better if I do it myself. Great, we can fix that. You probably already know that teams that take extreme ownership paves the way for the business owner to get their time back and to be able to put their effort into what matters the most, the 5% that we usually talk about. But do you know why most teams never achieve that level of autonomy, but instead need a ton of guidance? Maybe this is even your team. If you're an agency owner, course creator, or coach, and you have a team who's delivering inconsistent results, even though you feel like you're constantly guiding them, giving them everything they need to succeed, well, you're in the right place, because today we're going to talk about a little known framework that's super simple to use, together with a few KPIs or a few metrics that are going to make your team move consistently and improve performance 10x. You know, when you call customer service and then you finally get to ask your question, you talk to the chatbot, you told them like, no, I need to actually talk to a real human being. You've been listening to that stupid music, which is like some classic German whatever from 1932 or something like that. And you finally get them on their phone and you ask your question. And then they say, oh, I got to check with my manager. So for me, that's so incredibly frustrating. Like, it's 2024, we should just get the answer by a friggin' AI bot. But whatever, here we are. This is a classic example of a lose-lose-lose situation, because you have to wait. It took you a long time to get there. Your customer support representative, they have to not do their work because they have to go talk to someone else. And their manager, they have to engage not with the big term perspective, like the strategy and the planning, but the day-to-day operations. So literally everyone is discontent in this scenario. And we don't want this. This is like the crappiest of all situations, because everyone is discontent. And chances are a few of you guys are kind of running your teams this way. Because what happens here with the customer support representative is that they don't have the autonomy, or they don't have the skills, or they don't have the mandate to do whatever it is that would make you happy, to give you the answer that you need to move on. There are a few reasons why this might be the case. And if you feel like maybe this is a little bit of what's happening in your company, like you give your social media creation team to go out there and do something, and as soon as they hit a problem, they come back to you and they ask, hey, what do I do with this? Or they actually produce something and then they give it to you and you're like, it's not really what I wanted. It's not really up to my standard. I'll just redo it myself because it's so hard to kind of explain. And that's something we're going to try to figure out today, because we want you, the manager in our scenario, to look at the big pictures and your team to look at the day-to-day operations. The biggest mistakes I see with businesses who have teams who deliver inconsistently is that they actually lack a definition of what success is, and they're not tracking anything to make sure that you're moving towards success. Those are the two main things that makes it basically impossible, because if you don't know what success is and you're not tracking your way to it, then it's like, how the heck can anyone be successful on your team? What does the path to success means? And if you're not doing that, there's a bunch of problems that will occur. Oftentimes, this leads to VAs ghosting or just doing the absolute minimum. Like, you can kind of feel it when people are doing the minimum. You see the result, they're delivering what it is that you want, but it's just like nothing extra. That graphic is just like, it is a graphic, but there's nothing exciting about it. They didn't even name the title like exactly what it is. They just sent you the file, which is fine, because you never defined that that's an important part. But it's like, when people do that and do the little bit of extra, you're like, yes, this makes my life so much easier. And then it becomes the issue of, if success isn't defined, how could you achieve it? And how can they create that thing for you if it isn't clearly defined? Like, if you want someone to build you an IKEA table, right? You give them their freaking manual and they'll produce an IKEA table. But if you just tell them, hey, create a table, then it's like, oh, are you going to go out chop some wood? Like, how big is the table? Like, what type of table is it? And if you're not tracking their progress, if you're not checking them, setting the table up, and you're making sure that, okay, once they got their legs, I want to make sure that you're building it correctly. I want to check that it's up to standard. I'm going to insert a review point. If you're not doing that, then it's really hard to make sure that the output is consistent. You can think of it like Henry Ford and building the automobile, right? It's standardized. Everything is super standardized. So by the end of it, there's going to be a black car. But if you just go and tell people, hey, build me a car, then, I mean, they're probably going to make something that looks like a car, but it's going to be really poor quality. Things are going to break. The screws are going to come loose. And this also turns into a pretty bad loop because you're asking something of them. They're giving you something back that isn't up to standard, whatever the heck the standard is. And then you give them feedback, but it's still unclear a little bit what they're supposed to give you. So then you're like, they suck and they think you suck and everybody thinks everybody sucks. So they get off the train. So you see them as ghosting and you're like, whatever, I'm going to do it myself because VAs from the Philippines, they all suck. That's the type of conversations that I hear sometimes. And I think it's completely wrong. To fix this, we really need to do two things. First of all, we need to communicate enough information. Because if you communicate enough information, we will not waste their time, but sending them a 200 pages PDF on how to put together a table or an 90-minute Loom video on how to post things on social media, because they're never going to watch it and never going to remember it, so they can do it. And we need to be able to track their progress, their KPIs, if you so will. And I want to ask you here sincerely, do you have KPIs right now for your team? Like, how do you know that they are a good return on investment? How do you know that your investment in them is bringing something back to the team, back to the company? And for you guys to think like, I don't want to track KPIs, I don't want to turn this into a machine. Like, you're doing everyone a disservice if you're not giving them KPIs to work towards. Here's the thing. If you don't have anything where they can objectively look towards and say, hey, I've done what I'm supposed to do this week. Like in my case, my social media, she's like, one of her main metrics is that she needs to publish 5 reels or 5 pieces of content every week. If she doesn't, we both know that she hasn't done what she's supposed to do this week, which means nothing bad. It means the opposite. It means something really good because now we can both be curious. I can ask her, hey, how come you haven't hit your KPIs this week? We can be curious and try to figure out. And then maybe she'll say, you know what? This new system or this like new password sharing tool, Bitwarden, it's just so slow. It's just painfully slow and it takes like 20% more time to get things done. And I'm like, oh, cool. That's some great information. Like we can fix that. And then you can get up to speed again. Then I see in my little CEO dashboard week per week per week, like, okay, we're up here. We're hitting our KPIs, we're doing the right things. That is just so beautiful, so valuable. And I really hope you implement that today. And if you want to do that, there is a CEO dashboard that I'm talking about that you can access. If you go to sankersleadership.com/podcast, you'll find it all for free. And it's a super simple way to kind of track the progress of your team. You select a few metrics, you make sure that it's clear to your team, and every day or every Friday, they go in there and just mark like, hey, I've done this stuff, I've created this much content, and you'll get it on a nice little graph so you can look at it every Friday and think, boom, we're doing it. And if you manage to communicate just enough information, not wasting anybody's time and not cutting them short, then you will have people who are engaged, you will have people who care about the task, you will have people who will be able to work autonomously because they know the rules and the boundaries, and you will have people who will innovate and create things you didn't think were possible. And that's like the coolest part of all. In the example of our customer support manager, you will be able to not have to focus on the day-to-day stuff, the things that pop up. You will be able to lift your head and look further into the distance. Strategic planning, strategy, all the things that will actually move the needle in your business. And you'll be able to identify all the things that are keeping you from reaching your goals. Another beautiful part is like, you'll get the return on investment on your VA sooner or later. Like it won't be like just sending money to the Philippines and something comes back and you don't really know what's happening. But you will actually see that, okay, here's what I wanted you to do, and you're doing it. Awesome. Then I can always change what it is that I want you to do, and we can talk about adjustment in pay or whatever. But we can clearly now track and see that everybody's doing their own thing. By the way, this applies to you as well. Like you should have your own KPIs to hit every week. And I think most people who are really goal-oriented, they have some type of KPI or whatever, some type of metric that they hold themselves accountable to. Okay, so now the question becomes, well, what the heck is enough information and which metrics should I track? All of this kind of depends on what it is that you want to do. Let's say you're doing social media. Then you want to look at the end state. What is it that has value? Usually when it comes to social media, it's not about creating this stuff. It's the actual publishing. So if you create the most amazing things, like you tell your team like, hey, I want you to create 5 of whatever every week. But if it doesn't get published, the value is 0. or if it doesn't get scheduled, the value is 0. So I really like to look at the end stage and see, okay, what is it that actually matters? So in the case of my social media creator, it is 5 pieces of content, and then I define what that means, published per week. Then when it comes to leads and outreach, I once again look at the end in mind. It has to have conversations with people and to have new people into our world. So I look at how many outreach per week and how many of those turn into booked calls. So you got to be a little bit aware here, because if you pick metrics that they don't own, then it can be really hard for them to hit them. You want to put metrics that you know they can hit and that they own. And if that turns into booked calls or sales, then that's awesome. But if, let's say, your metric is like X amount of sales, well, chances are they're doing everything they can, but they might not hit that because of other things in the business which they don't own. But if you say, do X amount of outreach, do 40 outreach to cold audience from this list per week, then they can do that. And then if they can't do it, you could figure out, okay, what is it that it's keeping them from doing that? I use a Google form. You enter your name, and then it goes through all the KPIs per week. And you say, hey, KPI number 1, what's your metric? And then you enter your number, and then you go to the next one. Did you nail it for today? And you press yes. And then you go to the third question. What did you learn today? And this is the important part, because this is the lessons learned of your company. Because when they sit down and they write something like, I couldn't reach my metric because X, Y, or Z, then you go there and you have a discussion. Okay, I wonder if we can fix this. So that's really important. And if you do it on a daily basis, you probably won't lose a bunch of numbers, and you will have that feedback loop super short. So you can go by the end of the week, go through that list and see, okay, here are things why we're hitting our metrics or why we're not, and see if we can double down on the things that work and remove the things that are not. By the way, all the things we're talking about today, the CEO dashboard, the delegation template, they're all inside the community. They're all free. So just head on over to sankosleadership.com/podcast and you'll find all the good stuff in there. Let's talk about enough information or enough communication to your team. This, my friends, is a biggie. Like, this is where you make or break your team. This is where you create engagement, excitement, where you get people to stay for, I don't know how many years in a company. This is literally the thing that made my team go on 3 back-to-back deployments in the military, while most other teams did 1 and just quit because it was too much. So if you want to listen to anything, this is it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a short version here. There are other episodes which are going to talk about the same framework, and you will also find it in the community. But I want to give you the high performance team framework. It's PER. It's purpose, end state, and rules. The 3 things that you need to communicate every time you delegate something to someone. So if you have a team who care and they do the right things, but results are kind of useless because they break rules, then chances are you have communicated a purpose and an end state, but you have missed the rules. So you can see it something like this. You have 3 circles. You have the rules, the purpose, and the end state. And you could see them kind of as like a Venn diagram where they overlap in the middle. And if we first look at the purpose is, why is this important? Why is it important to them? Why is it important to the company? Why the heck does this thing need to be solved or created or whatever? The second thing is the end state. What will the world look like when the task is completed? What is the difference? Like in the case of the IKEA table, it's like, well, the difference is that it's a pile of semi-quality woodworks and it will be turned into a usable table. Like the end state is a table that I can sit 8 people with and have a party. And the rules are things that must happen or cannot happen. So in the example of the IKEA table, it would be, you must only use the tools and the screws that are provided. You cannot start sawing or using own nails or stuff like that. But that's a rule. If you do that, then you're doing the wrong things. And in the social media creation world, it would be like breaking the Facebook or Meta ads policy. So the rules are hard set. They cannot be crossed. That keeps you inside the right box. And if you move outside, you're doing the wrong things. And if we now go look at this diagram, this Venn diagram, and we look at what happens when you're missing one piece of the cake, then if you have a team who care and they're doing the right things, but results are like useless because they break one of those rules, or they miss the Facebook ad policy, or they didn't use your template, the chances are you haven't really communicated the rules of things. Are there templates they need to use? Are there certain specific guidelines they have to adhere to? These are kind of the people who are working outside of the box. They're just like, great stuff, but honestly, I can't use it. You want people to innovate inside of the box. You want to either have them create the box or you create the box for them and then do the best work they can within the box. But you don't want them to move beyond. Like, you don't want them to build a freaking spaceship if you're trying to run a social media agency or whatever. I think you get it. And if you have people who follow the rules and they do the right things, but they rarely innovate, they rarely create something new, and they don't really come with something exciting, then chances are that you communicate the rules and the end state pretty clearly, but you haven't really figured out how to communicate the purpose. You haven't really figured out why they should care about this. These are the people we talked about before who just, they show up, they do their thing, but they're like, whatever, I don't give a crap, you know. I'm not going to rename the file because whatever, nobody's going to tell me to do it anyways. And if you have people who are like super engaged, they really innovate, they create amazing things, whether it's graphics or whatever it may be, and you're just like, wow, this is so cool. And they work within your rules. They're not breaking any policies or anything, but they're giving you the wrong thing. Let's say you want them to create a graphic for an ad, and they create this like, oh, this is so cool. And it's within policy for the Facebook ads or Meta ads, but it's a static post. We want a reel, so you can't use it anyways. Like, chances are you haven't really communicated what the end state are, what actually it is that you want them to produce. So that's kind of like a mini assessment for you, where you can figure out what type of things that you need to work on. Like, is it the purpose, the end state, or the rules? And if you want to dive deeper into this, there's more training and more tools and templates within the community. So you're super welcome to join up. And of course, if you nail all of this, you end up in the middle, in the Venn diagram where everything overlaps. This is where you'll find the 3 C's, the 3 C's of teamwork magic. People who care about the task, people who are capable to solve the task, and people who are willing to cooperate how to solve it. It's not just their way or my way. This is when you have autonomy, innovation, and when it's fun to lead, because they will come back to you having solved things before you even knew that it was a problem. And they will come back to you with solutions rather than problems. This is fun. And it's kind of like a cake. If you miss just one piece, or it's the wrong order, or it's not enough or too much of one of them, then you will not get autonomy. And yes, it might sound like overwhelming and complicated, and it's like, oh, I got to remember all this stuff. But no, those of you who've been around for a while, you know there's a crystal clear delegation template, which is for you to fill out. You fill that thing out, you brainstorm them a bit, you give that to your team, and then tell you, I don't really understand. And then you improve that template. And what happens? Well, boom, you have a very simple SOP that you can use for your next VA or whoever you want to onboard later. It's just magic. So I really would like for you to use that one, at least if you want to make your life simple and you want people to work autonomously. Well, okay, that's about it. If you want to be able to work on the big picture stuff, you want a team that's autonomous, you don't want to redo a bunch of work of your team, and you want to know the return on investment on your VAs, then here's what you need to do. You need to track your success metrics, and you need to communicate the purpose, end state, and rules. If you do that, life is going to be simple, and you'll be able to break through that 6-figure plateau in no time. That's it for today. Take care, and I'm happy you joined CEO School. See you next week.